Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of scrutiny on the 5th of March from the Walton Suite in Winchester Guildhall. The time is 6:30 and I'm Councillor Caroline Brooke and I'm chair of this committee. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available for later viewing. Please ensure mobile phones are switched off or on silent, and in the event of emergency or need to evacuate, the fire alarm will sound and please follow instructions from the team. I'd like to welcome all of the members of the public and visiting councillors in attendance today, and I'll invite you forward when it's your time to contribute. A very warm welcome to Chief Inspector Corinne Bishop for joining us this evening, District Commander for Winchester. Please note that item 7, Development Delivery Plans, Central Winchester Regeneration, contains an exempt appendix. If members wish to discuss any part of this exempt paper, the public will be asked to leave and will leave the meeting during that discussion. When we finish the exempt paper, if the public would like to come back into open session, they'd be very welcome to rejoin us. But you're also, of course, more than welcome to leave should you wish to. I would perfectly understand that you don't want to hang around. So turning to the agenda. So apologies and deputy members. Matthew, please.
Good evening, Chair, members. Apologies from Councillor Atchwell and Councillor Power. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Wallace, find your little reading thing.
Right. I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of the items on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Very well read. So item 3 on the agenda is chairperson's announcements. So I just wanted to talk about the members' asset review meeting that we had since our last scrutiny meeting, because of course we'd requested that. So the meeting was held on Wednesday the 12th of February with councillors from this committee as well as deputy councillors and Jeff Coe, the corporate head of asset management, and he talked through how the commercial portfolio is managed, some of the successes the team has recently had with proactively managing the portfolio, and regarding how they are maximising income generation and looking at the priorities. Councillors were reassured by what they heard, but expressed a desire to know what assets the council owns in more detail. Some councillors had some access to GIS, but others appeared to have less access. So it was agreed that all councillors who attend that meeting will be given the same level of access to enable them to look at what the council actually owns and where the assets sit. It was also suggested that an annual meeting would be useful for members to have a clearer understanding of how we are progressing with various projects. And understanding what's happening with the assets. There was also discussion around sales of assets, how that happens, and how we could generate better income from some of the assets that the council holds. But we will also continue to monitor how the portfolio evolves during the next year and when we have our next review meeting in a year's time. Do any councillors who attended that meeting have anything they'd like to add to that, or was that a good summary? Excellent, thank you. So coming on to item 4, minutes of the meeting of the 4th of February 2025. Can the minutes from the last meeting be agreed and signed as a correct record? Councillor Wallace.
I just wanted to check something on page 7, right, action 3 or resolved 3. It states that the cabinet member review the points raised regarding the corner house property and if required provides further feedback to the committee. Now, we had a long discussion about corner house at the meeting. It was my understanding that the action was on Councillor Todd to come back to the committee and report out on what he had found, not an option that I might have misunderstood.
That's not what I wrote down because I handed that to Matthew. However, it was my understanding that he was going to forward on to us any more information that he had regarding the purchase and how that decision was come to. And I haven't seen anything since the meeting.
Do we need to modify the wording at all? Do you think to capture the fact that he's meant to be providing something back to us?
We can certainly do that. Matthew, are you happy to amend that to say Councillor Todd will provide information when he comes across it to the members?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can do that, or we can add an action on these minutes to that effect.
Adding an action might be useful, Matthew. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other than that, can we agree that that was a correct record of the previous meeting? Thank you. Okay, so now we come to public participation. We have Julian Perkins and Monica Gill who've registered to speak. And Councillor Lee has also registered to speak on item 6, 7, 8. Is that correct? Julian and Monica, would you both like to speak at this point during the public participation section, or is there a specific paper you'd like to speak on? Yep. Okay. Welcome, Monica. Lovely to see you again. If you'd like to come forward. No problem at all. You take your time.
Might not be very good in the body, but I'm all right in the head. Somebody so typical. Thank you for allowing me to address you. What I'm here for is to let councillors know that we have formed a tenants and residents association group. Tenants, Winchester City Council tenants have tact that they can go to, but other groups of people don't. So we're going to take up what we're going to represent them. So what I'm here for is to ask councillors if, when they're in their wards, if they will publicise it for us so that they can. I remember a meeting recently, a councillor said that the people go to there. Well, perhaps we can do that for you. It is important because residents still pay their council tax and things, and they should have a voice, but they don't at the moment. So that's all I'm asking for, is that we're formed by 14 members. We have regular meetings. We've got a meeting on the 20th of March. We've had 3 meetings which have been attended by contractors from Winchester City Council, and everything we've asked them to do, they come back and done. And I think it is important that residents should also have the right to go somewhere where they can bring up any problems that they've got, especially with things like ground maintenance. And so that's all I'm asking for you to do, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Monica. Would it be possible for you to send across perhaps the contact details of who to contact should the residents wish to?
Yeah, we're in the process of having some flyers. We have got a committee. We have got an account now, which was hard to get, but we are having some flyers printed. So once they're done, if we've got enough for the next meeting, but we have had one councillor attend our meeting, and tomorrow we've got somebody from another council attending our committee meeting. So that's what I'm really asking for. I just hope that you will help us out, please, because we can't get round everywhere.
Thank you, Monica. If we receive a copy of the flyer, we can certainly share
get
it
the
for
flyers
you.
round.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Julian Perkins, please, if you'd like to come forward. Thank you.
Good evening. I address this scrutiny meeting with regards to the totally inadequate facilities that still exist at the Market Lane public toilets. In 2023, I addressed your cabinet to highlight my concerns, at which time I was informed that a budget of £760,000 was being prepared to refurbish the toilets, for which Winchester City Council is responsible for. Later in 2023, I again spoke to your cabinet following a personally distressing visit to the disabled facility on this same site, after which I later met the then project manager for these facilities, who agreed the need for really urgent action. At this time, he stated that this particular block had by far the greatest usage of any of the facilities under his control, stating a figure in excess of 900 visits per day was the norm for this site, especially during peak tourist periods, beg your pardon. I understand that the refurbishments are now complete at this facility, with the exception of a new door for the disabled entrance, which is ordered but not yet fitted. On a recent visit myself, there has been some minor improvements, with a few components replaced, along with a greater attention to what was permanent flooring awash with water before. Following my recent request under the Freedom of Information Act, I was told that the expenditure at this facility amounted to £30,173 in total for both general needs and disabled unit, which represents just 3.9% of the funds of 76,000 approved. My question to this meeting is to ask why, in the certain knowledge that our council is very aware of the numerous complaints made by our tourist visitors, of which they're approaching 1 million a year, alongside our own residents, frequent press reports and letters, it has chosen to spend so little on these facilities in our magnificent city. My plea tonight is to respectfully urge all councillors present to use their very best endeavours to press for funding sufficient to bring these Market Lane facilities up to a proper standard for public use. The refurbishments were approved for funding on the 13th of September 2023 to the tune of £780,000. Some 17 months later, only £112,000 has been spent, even though at that time it was known that the Market Lane unit would need an extension to the lease prior to major expenditure. Our residents deserve better. Our visitors deserve better. Our city deserves much, much better. Thank you for allowing me to address you.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us this evening. We'll certainly note that and pass forward your comments. And hopefully we'll have some thoughts back to you at our next meeting. If I know you won't be here, but we will be online. And we will certainly discuss as a group whether public toilets is something we'd like to pick up as a task and finish group. So thank you for your feedback. It's much appreciated. Thank you very much to both public speakers and for coming on and speaking to us this evening. So on to item 6 of the agenda, we've got the annual community safety performance update. I love this part of it. Every year I look forward to it. So I would like to welcome again Corinne Bishop, who's come with us today. We've also got Sandra Tuddenham from who are both part of the Community Safety Partnership together. And I understand that we will have an intro tonight. Councillor Becker. Look for you at the back, sorry.
I was wondering when you get to me. I think Councillor Lee wanted to speak as well. I don't know if he wants to
Yes,
go first
I'm
or
aware
I'll
of
do
that.
my
I'm going
introduction.
through my chair bit.
That's fine.
Thanks, Councillor Becker.
Cool. No, so as we know,
No, we're not ready for your intro yet. Thank you. So we'll have Councillor Becker doing an intro. Councillor Lee, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. So if you'd like to come forward, that would be great. And then we'll come to your intro. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. I'd like to extend my thanks to the Community Safety Partnership, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary, and our Neighbourhood and Community Safety team for their dedication in keeping our communities safe in these challenging times. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the hard work of the officers in compiling this report. Clearly, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have some concerns, and I hope the scrutiny and yourselves will be able to clarify some of my concerns. And my comments and questions are intended as constructive challenges for the benefits of residents and their respective district parish councils and the neighbourhood watch teams. Crime and data reports, I understand, in Winchester District has risen by 29% in the year to June 2024, with 67.1 crimes per 1,000 people, thankfully lower than the national average of 91.3. However, I was hoping to see a breakdown of the crime and disorder issues between urban and rural areas, particularly for the southern parishes and my ward, Central Meon Valley. Winchester City Council promotes a one district approach, so understanding these differences, I believe, is vital for ward councillors and parishes. So was this breakdown omitted? I see there is some, but largely omitted because rural figures are too small to be meaningful, or is there another reason? The current Community Safety Partnership refers to reduction initiatives and taking a proactive stance, enhancing feelings of safety and a sense of community in our rural and urban areas across our district. Great, and I fully support that. However, I'm a little bit disappointed that I'm bringing back to this committee a year later ongoing concerns about the switch off of landlines, going digital by 2027, telecare services after 3G switch off, and these concerns are worrying a number of my residents. How do they contact these services when they need them when there's no telecommunications? Concerns are not helped by distant police stations and the limited operating hours of the police stations and infrequent rural police patrols. Rural areas like Central Meon Valley, where power outages can be frequent and where we experience poor mobile coverage, can leave residents unable to contact emergency services when there are extreme conditions of outages, particularly during obviously severe weather. And there are two related issues, the telecare, which is, I understand, now part of a telecare national action plan, but how will major broadband providers ensure vulnerable users are protected under this plan? And how will the support service operate during extended blackouts when battery backup is exhausted? Emergency planning, I'm not going to linger on because it's not the remit of the Community Safety Partnership, but it is an enabler for well-being and safety mindsets. And I appreciate, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to Mr. Simon Howson, who over the last 12 months has kept us up to date with some of the issues that we've raised. So can I ask for the Community Safety Partnership to take this issue more seriously this year and work with partners to develop a clear action plan with advice for communities? Additionally, could the Council obtain and share communication providers' full fibre rollout plans for the Winchester wards where none exists? It'd also be helpful to know if there are emergency backup power plans for telecommunications for current and future services during power outages when battery backup is exhausted. Vulnerable residents and those at risk of crime need to reach services when they need to. So can these issues be included in the 2025-26 annual delivery plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Ms Sadie, if you'd like to pick that one up, please.
Thank you very much. The issue of reaching emergency services at any point doesn't sit with the Community Safety Partnership. Am I jumping in where you don't want me to? No, I'm all right. Yes. So adding it up to talk to the committee now. Sorry, adding it to the Community Safety Partnership action plan wouldn't be the right thing for you to do because that's not the right team and group that could make some action on this. Where this can be actioned is the local resilience forum and our main direct route through Hampshire County Council to do that. Knowing, because Councillor Lee was very kind to give us a heads up of what he was going to ask, we've asked Simon Howson to contact them to ask if it's in their delivery plan. He didn't have an answer in time for us today, but he will come back to us on that. So if the committee is happy to take that, because it's not strictly about this item, I'll take an action for Simon Howson to update committee when he's got some news.
Thank you, Ms Sadie. So who would like to speak first?
I pressed the right button. Excellent, thank you. In relation to your first question around the breakdown between urban and rural, I can get that for you and add that to the minutes so that you've got a breakdown of that. It wasn't omitted on purpose or for any other reason, but we should be able to show you the difference between the city and the urban area and the rural areas so that you can see a breakdown of that. We do review our rural crime So you've got crime that happens in an area that's identified as rural, but you also have crimes that are rural in their nature, which we break down and look at as well. So I'll get that for you.
So would you like to do your intro, your little?
Sorry, I'm doing the
Sorry,
intro.
Councillor Becker.
So as you're aware, this is the annual report from the Community Safety Partnership. As the City Council, we are the responsible authority and we support the delivery of crime and disorder. The delivery of crime and disorder related statutory duty by dedicating officer posts to the role and ensuring the council's corporate priorities are delivered in the community safety context as appropriate. The report and the appendices detail some significant successes this year, especially regarding the nighttime economy, antisocial behaviour and grant funding applications. Antisocial behaviour very much remains a focus for the partnership, and there has been a lot of activity aimed at reducing ASB, not just within the city but across the district. This year, this includes public reassurance, collaboration with housing landlords, outreach provision and grant funding applications. Working with young people has also been a focus for the partnership this year, so we were really pleased to see the launch of the Legacy Project in Winchester, which provides one-to-one mentoring sessions for those young people who unfortunately have come to the attention of our officers because of their behaviour. Domestic violence and the Daha Project and violence against women and girls has also been a focus of this year. You'll see in the data that the report refers largely to women as victims of violence and abuse, but that's because the focus this year has been violence against women and girls. But as a partnership, we've always and we will always signpost and promote campaigns for all victims of domestic violence and abuse. The number of individuals who are homeless and have been found by outreach this year is currently low. This is down to the efforts of specialist providers and the CSP that we put in place to ensure access to crash beds and night beds are available, which is in addition to the SWEP provision which has been in place for the last few nights. To put this in the context of the report means that the majority of those who appear homeless may be attached to a wider street community during the day, but they are in fact accommodated or have been offered accommodation, and we do work with those individuals as we come across them. CSP is always keen to add context to the data we collect, and that is the case within the report. So we have Corinne and Sandra here to give the flavour to the numbers tonight. I'm not sure, Corinne, do you want to give a brief update? Yes, you do, as well, before answering any questions from the committee.
Good evening, everyone. So this is just a bit of an overview, as Councillor Becker said, just to add a bit of context. So for our district area and force performance goals, that's what I have to deliver against, which is to reduce crime for the period that we've shown for April to Christmas. Crime was down by 0.8%. Massive, but it is a reduction. Increase in charge and summons, we're up 20%. Maintain out of court resolutions, we're up 2%. Improve our response to grade 1s and grade 2 calls. We're currently sat that we are achieving 63.7% across both of those for our service level agreement, and also increase our victim satisfaction. Our target is 65% and Winchester's currently sat at 68.2%. So I'm really happy with the work that my team have done, and we continue to focus on that every month. And I look at where we are with that. It does go up and down depending on the season, time of the year, but we do track and monitor that. Current district priorities for Winchester. Our first one is drug related harm. Our main one is youth being used to sell cannabis, vapes and other drugs. On a positive note, over the last few months, we've done 4 warrants. We've got 2 people currently on bail for supplying drug offences and some modern day slavery. And we've had 2 young people that are within our youth offending team interventions. They're still in progress, so we continue to work that and monitor that each month. Other current district priority at the moment is rural crime, looking at commercial burglaries, so our rural locations where we're having plant machinery being stolen, and also theft for motor vehicles, so we're targeting specific individuals in relation to that. So depending on what the crime has happened the previous month will depend on what the district priorities are, and we review that. So as a district, we're still top of the force in relation to our formal action taken. We continue to see a decrease in shoplifting offences. And we've currently our formal action for shoplifting across both the city and Whiteley was sat at 48.8%. So nearly half of the people we deal with, we've got some formal action taken there. Continue to work with stores around reporting offences and improving our CCTV coverage, especially in those locations that don't have so much. And we continue to do taser actions in both Winchester City and in Whiteley Village, where we've got our more concentrated businesses around shoplifting. We have 9 community behaviour orders in place, and a further community behaviour order of our most prolific shoplifter is in the process of being written at the moment. For me, I work really closely with Sandra. That partnership working is really key. Councillor Becker alluded to, we've had funding from the Police Crime Commissioner, from the ASB fund, and that's assisted in extra patrols of our bid rangers during key times within the city centre. We also have a monthly meeting called OVAL, which stands for Offender, Victim and Location. And this is a multi-agency response pathway for those coming to the attention of partner agencies that are deemed at risk to the community and themselves due to their behaviour. And that is for all areas of Winchester. So my teams will come with the details of those people. We look at persistent offenders, habitual knife carriers, hotspots, vulnerable individuals, drug-related individuals, which is called Operation Fortress, and violence against women and girls, and that's for both rural Bishops Waltham and our city nominals. I sit on the board of directors for the Business Improvement District, which allows me access to issues around businesses, contact with universities and the City Council. That's a monthly meeting to update them on what we're doing and also any issues that come. As we know, we have a very large prison within Winchester, large commission of offences within the prison. There has been previous issues with delays in reporting and gaps in us with evidence. We currently have 250 reports a year that come out of the prison. I've embedded an officer within the prison to support staff and victims in evidence gathering, and that's around prisoner on prisoner offences, prisoner on staff, prisoner on the state, and something that we call throwovers, where people throw things over into the prison. So we continue to work as a problem-solving plan, and we're trying to benchmark what other forces are doing to try and make sure that we can reduce crime in that location. Violence against women and girls continue to work in partnership, and that's probably been the focus for the last year. A lot of work has gone into that. Where on Friday we had some recording within our nighttime economy, and Winchester is being showcased nationally for the work within policing that we're doing around violence on women and girls. So video is going to be created, or we've done the videoing, the filming for it, and that will be presented at a national conference in the next couple of months, and hopefully we can share that when that comes out. So just a few updates that I would really like to take away to pass on to all the people that you're in contact with. Last year I talked about Let's Talk. It was a new thing that came in. We've just hit the 1 year anniversary, and that is around engaging our communities, especially our communities that are hard to reach, as to what do they feel their priorities are. So I talked about what our priorities are from a policing perspective, but from the public for Winchester and the surrounding areas, the top one is speeding, second one is fly tipping, the third one is antisocial behaviour, the fourth one is road safety, and the fifth one is parking issues. So we listen to those members of the public and what we can then do in partnership to support all of those. Hans Snap, if you haven't heard of it, please Google it. It's an initiative to support driving offences from dash cam footage. So whether that's from a vehicle, especially for those out in the rural area who are equine riders, if you have a dash cam on your helmet and someone is driving too close to you and you have that offence, you can submit that via Hans Snap, and we will look to prosecute those offenders. Hans Alert has been running. If you are not signed up to it, please do so. That will then give you information for the areas that you are living in. Last in September, for those outside of the Winchester City Centre, we have now got a response hub out of Bishops Waltham. I know it's not currently open to the public, but we do have 24/7 response out of Bishops Waltham now. So there are 2 officers per team that support the teams out of Winchester. So we've got, for me, much better coverage, which means we're getting to those calls a lot quicker. Still supported by Fareham and Waterlooville, if they are the closest officer, but it's really nice now that we've got those teams embedded over that side, so I'm really pleased with that. You probably heard a lot about uplift, extra officers. What does that mean for Winchester? So the last 12 months we've had 12 new students come to our frontline response teams and 5 detective students on the pathway, and we'll be taking on more again this year. I'm still waiting to find out how many we get. I've got a new neighbourhood inspector, Stuart Ross, started. He'll be covering Alresford and Bishop's Waltham. Stuart worked with me when I was on Country Watch, massively passionate about rural crime. There's a lot that's going on behind the scenes for us to be tackling rural crime across Winchester and our rural areas. Watch this space on that one. I can't divulge too much at the moment. And I was just going to give you a couple of updates just to finish off if I've got time. These are just some of the convictions that our CID team have dealt with over the last year. So there was a GBH incident, RV Gallimore on his mother, received a 9-year custodial sentence, indefinite restraining order, and is on the dangerous offenders list. RV Lawrence, an organised crime group member within HMP prison, was found in possession of a homemade grossly offensive weapon, had an extra 2 years added to their sentence. RV Williams engaged in sexual communication with a child and breach of their sexual behaviour order, 3 years in custody. The very tragic murder of June Henty in 2023 by her grandson-in-law, was charged with attempt murder following her death. He pleaded guilty last week to murder and will be sentenced in May. And then RV Smith versus Berridge, which was a blackmail and robbery. Berridge has received 18 years in prison and Smith 12 years, an indefinite restraining order. So we continue to tackle our most serious offences. And that was just a breakdown of a few. That's a summary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Sandra, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think I can beat that, to be honest. So I'm just here to answer any questions if I can about the report.
Thank you. And thank you, Corinne. That was really great. Thank you. So committee, you will all have had a chance to look through some of the statistics information that Corinne and Sandra have kindly put together for us for our information. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Reach.
Thank you. Just a simple one. One of the priorities is getting residents to report criminal activity or whatever. What's the best way for them to do it, please?
There's a number of ways. If it's immediate, 999. If it's not, 101. Failing that, if you have phone signal and internet, you can do it you can do it online, or you come into the station.
Sandra?
Can I just add, if it's antisocial behaviour, then you can use the community safety inbox, because we look at that at various times of the day. But we also do letter drops, reminding people that they can report it through the council website or through 101. So the antisocial behaviour flyers, if we've got a spate of antisocial behaviour in a particular location, we will do a letter drop and drop in the flyers so people know how to report.
Councillor Clay?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your update, Chief Inspector Bishop. That was very good. And whilst I appreciate all that the team does, and I know you're very busy, this report, as I read it, and I apologise if I've missed it, concentrates so much on Winchester, but not the rural areas. And I do get asked by residents, we never see a police, we never see neighbourhood services or community officers. So I would echo some of Councillor Lee's queries. Please, may I ask, and I know you said you'll do it now, for a breakdown of urban and rural activities, if you like, because we feel a little bit out on a limb there when it comes to this. So please, may I ask that? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I'll get that. So it goes out in the minutes. So we've got a bit more information on the breakdown of what the crime types. I think what we've given is for the whole of Winchester. So we'll be able to see what that breakdown is, which I can do. We've got our neighbourhood officers, our dedicated neighbourhood officers, and our PCSOs that work out of Bishop's Waltham. And if you're not seeing sufficient patrols, I can speak to the team to make sure that we do those.
In terms of the neighbourhood services team, obviously we're a small team, and we're responsive, if you like, as a team, because we're only 4 in the whole team. So definitely we work in partnership with the local police in the rural areas, and we will respond to any requests to come out to do street briefs, neighbourhood forum events, and obviously, as I said, tackling antisocial behaviour. So unfortunately, we don't have the resource to be out doing regular patrols, but if there is a hotspot, we will focus all of our attention in that hotspot and provide the remedial action. I think it's also important to say that, yes, you're right, in terms of looking at the report, we haven't really broken it down into the sort of urban and rural split, but we will make sure that we do that for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, completely separately from Councillor Clear, that I see PCSO Stephanie Slater, can't remember her married name, several times a month coming around in patrol vehicles. So completely contrary to that, I see them quite regularly in and around Mead and Newlands. So maybe just a bit more in Wickham. Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. I also coordinate the Winchester Straw for Community Speed Watch here in the city, and work with other community speed watch organisations across Hampshire. Interested in your feedback on the Let's Talk and identifying that speeding, parking and road safety are high priorities for residents in the district. Just wondering how that can be then reflected in the priorities that are represented by the Community Safety Partnership.
That's Batho, thank you. I know we've had some previous discussions around road safety. Setting up the local speed watch is really key. The data around accidents is depending on where they put the camera van, but that's something that we can definitely look at going forward. And I know we've had a discussion that we'll probably meet up outside this meeting to see how best form we can push that in all of the areas. And I'm also mindful that I could probably add some extra data around what the speeding looks like and the feedback from those the residents that actually do some cracking work out in the communities. So I'll add that onto my list.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other councillor, or go to Councillor Pett, then Councillor Bolton, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm going to bang on the same theme. I represent, as Councillor Bolton does, up in Meon Valley Ward. We've got 15 settlements, 12 parishes. Some of those settlements very small. But I suspect there's an issue here if you don't know what you don't know about drug use in some of those settlements. And you know, we could probably both roll off several sites where I can't say that we know definitely there is dealing going on, but we've got a pretty good idea it's going on. We have locations in our communities where local residents know there is a drug interest locally. Certainly in my own village, we haven't seen a PCSO for a long time. We used to have one come to our parish assembly every year. That stopped some years ago. And the same is true of several other of our villages. When I went on the website a few months ago, when we had that thing where you could look up, see where your local contact was, I ended up in a loop on there because there wasn't one. I fear that there is probably a lot of undetected activity going on in the rural area. And if it is drug related, that is exceedingly corrosive in areas that everybody in the city likes to think are sort of havens of respectability and tranquility. You know, we certainly, Councillor Bolton and I, know very well that there is a sort of underbelly of activity out there. that I don't think, with greatest respect to you, that you have a full handle on.
Thank you for your comments. In relation to drug-related issues, as you've alluded to, and I wrote it on my notes and didn't say it previously, is report, report, report. So we can only work on the information that's given to us. Every day I'll look at the crimes that have happened the previous 24 hours, and we do that on a daily basis, and on a monthly basis we look at where the crime is happening. So if the reports are coming in that we've got an issue in a certain location, we will be putting our patrols in that location. So if you could just please encourage people, even if they're not a victim of crime themselves, it would be recorded as intelligence. That intelligence gets sanitised, and then we can look at what we can do in relation to that. I've got a priority crime team that covers the whole area, and we do focus on drug-related harm. We're aware of county lines, so when we do have county lines and telephone numbers that we know are using for dealing, we are doing a lot of work around those in the background, which you probably wouldn't hear about. But all I would encourage you to do is to ask your residents to report any intel of any drug offences that they feel.
If I may just come back quickly, certainly I encourage people to report. A lot of people won't, because they fear repercussions from doing that. And clearly the best way of getting intelligence is having ears and eyes on the ground, finding out what that intelligence is for yourselves. And I fear that's not happening. Or certainly it's not visible. It may be invisible and happening. If you could assure me that's the case, then fine.
So in relation to intelligence, if you're a victim of crime, we will update you. We have a legal obligation to update you. If you give us information that's intelligent, you probably won't hear back from us in relation to that. So there will be things being done in the background. If people are afraid to come forward, we have Crime Stoppers as well, which is an anonymous reporting platform which people can utilise. And any intelligence that comes in, it would get sanitised, and if it puts somebody at risk, we would look at that as well.
Councillor Bolton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On a different subject, so on the Stop Domestic Abuse services, it's gone up rather a lot, and that may be partly what's skewing the numbers a bit. But and you say that this is a sort of a increased reporting. I'd love to know what's behind that increased reporting. And then you go on to say that the those services, refuge referrals can only be recorded where there are vacancies, and these are limited by refuge capacity. And I just wondered to what extent you'd be able to give us a sense of what that oversubscription looks like and how we need to best handle that. Thank you.
I probably can't provide the figures for you tonight, but I can add those figures to the minutes of this meeting if that helps, because I will need to go back to Stop Domestic Abuse to clarify with them what those figures are. In terms of the increased reporting, we do get really involved in all of the national campaigns, and we bring that down to a local level. So I think there's a greater awareness and almost a greater acceptance that it's okay to report as a victim of domestic abuse or a victim of violence. And I think that central government have made that very clear in terms of making it a focus for us as a partnership. So wherever there's an opportunity for us to raise awareness, we will, but also we're providing education around healthy relationships and behaviour change in schools. And I think that's also impacting on some of the information that's also getting fed out in the wider community. We've also, and I think you'll see on page 19, that through the domestic abuse housing accreditation that we are applying for, we've got co-located officers within the city council in our housing team from Stop Domestic Abuse. And I think the conversations that are going on there around those who are disclosing is also having an impact on those being referred to support services. So I think it is positive. But if you want me to clarify, then I'll go back to Stop Domestic Abuse and I'll add that response in the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you. I want to start by saying thank you to you guys actually for all you're doing. I know we've got a few questions for you, but we do appreciate everything you do. So thank you very much. Just a couple of questions, really. I think more for Sandra. I had I saw on page 19 it also says Yellow Door was commissioned. This kind of follows on from Councillor Bolton's question. Yellow Door were commissioned to do some training on domestic abuse, but for the Winchester City schools only. Can you, why? Obviously, we get domestic abuse happens out in the rural areas as well. So can you comment on that, please?
Yes, I can reassure you that we've also got some additional funding, which we're in conversation now with Swanmore College and also Sparshot College, and we will be running some behavioural change events there. And there will be a peer-led project, and I think it will be at Swanmore College, where the pupils themselves will make a video, an educational video, an awareness raising video about domestic abuse and violence against girls and women.
Thank you. That's good to hear. I think it's slightly misleading in the report that it's just focused on the city. That's all. The other question was, I know Chief Inspector talked about how the covering crime at the shops in Whiteley as well as in Winchester. Could you tell us? I'm aware of various antisocial behaviour incidences that have happened down in Whiteley. How much? You said you've got a team of 4 up in Winchester. Do they ever go down to Whiteley and support there? And this is more for Sandra.
So the neighbourhood officers that are in my team they have a dual role. So they're CSAT accredited, which is community safety accredited via the Chief Constable, which gives them the power to ask for names and addresses, etc. But their role is also around our housing stock. So they undertake the health and safety checks around housing stock as well. So they've got a bit of a dual role, but we also have a lead, an ASB lead within my team, whose full-time job is to look at and manage antisocial behaviour. So it will be that individual that would undertake the initial investigation, pull the partnership together. So we always call a task and finish group. We'd involve the parish council if we needed to, and all of our key partners, so our PCSOs, etc. And then obviously that's when we do the letter drops, street briefs, etc. So we're very much a responsive service because we can't actually be there all the time. So if you're saying that there's antisocial behaviour in Whiteley, and again it goes back to Councillor Pett, as long as we know about it, we can then respond accordingly.
Just to completely clarify, so it is clear, Becky's role as the ASB lead is across the district. It is not a city role, it is a district role.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions, if I may. Coming back to the domestic abuse, are you finding an increase of reports from people who are being financially abused or intimidation as and other forms of non-violent abuse? Because, of course, they become more and more prominent and more recognised as domestic abuse.
Yeah, we see quite an increase in CCB, coercive control. So there isn't actually any physical abuse, but it is that control around people's movements, what they can do, what they can wear, around financial. So I see a lot more of that now than we used to.
The other question I had, oh, sorry.
Okay, I was also going to say linked to the violence against women and girls, so VORG, obviously stalking is another one that we get involved in. And so obviously making sure that we've got awareness campaigns around stalking and support services, but also, of course, young people. So children in the home, we also need to look at how that impacts on them, and as they get into the teens and adults, about behaviour change and so on.
Thank you. The only other question I had was, I saw there'd been an increase in the drug trafficking numbers, and I wondered if this was because we've seen the increase in drug trafficking, or if it is because of the focus on county lines and drug trafficking as a whole.
So a lot of the drug trafficking is things coming in through borders where people are posting drugs, buying things online. So that is the increase in the drug trafficking. So it's being identified more from Border Force through the post office, and then we're dealing with those.
Sorry, I was just thinking. Also, in the report, we talk about about an increase in possession, drug possession, and that links very closely to the nighttime economy, because obviously through the BORG and the Safer Streets funding, where our police officers have got lots of operations going on. So when there's a stop and search, obviously if they've got drugs on them, that is then included in the possession stats.
Councillor Pett, please.
Sorry, it's hopefully it's much easier than my last. You mentioned traffic and speeding as being an issue that's raised with you a lot. It would be really useful if we had some data on the efficacy of the average speed schemes on the A32 and the A272, which I know took a lot of getting, and we're very grateful that they've been installed now for 2 years. But I'm often asked, how effective are they? It would be really useful if we could have some data at some point on that, please.
I'll see what I can do.
Councillor Bolton.
This is one of those questions asked straight from the horse's mouth opportunities, because we read a lot about how much police time is taken up with non-crime hate incidents reporting, and I wondered if you could tell me whether that's a big issue for you or not.
I didn't quite hear what you said. Sorry.
So non-hate crime incidents, is that a big issue for you? It's reported a lot in the paper, and I thought I'd find out from the horse's mouth if you find it a problem.
Non-hate crime incidents.
No.
I'm struggling to answer that question.
I think all hate crime is a crime. All hate incidents would be reported as a crime.
Can you give us an example, Councillor Bolton?
So an example is an incident where, unfortunately, I mean, this has been a big item in a lot of newspapers, Telegraph. I don't know about GB News, I'm afraid. But it is where there is a suspicion that this could lead to a hate crime being committed. And officers are having to report these incidents and make note of them, noting the individuals involved. And it's been a very widely reported. I'm sure other members of this committee have read about it. It's been alleged that it's taking up an enormous amount of police time and getting in the way of working on proper crimes. And it is the phrase is it is a non-crime hate incident report.
I think my lack of being able to answer the question probably answers the question, in that I don't think it's taking up our time.
Thank you. I think that was the answer. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Batho.
Yes, thank you again. I just wanted to go to page, there's no page number on it now. Anyway, it's in the information around the domestic abuse. There's a comment there that there are gaps in referrals coming through from children's services, and that there is now a significant number of referrals being received from parents, and up to 90% from the non-abusive parent. Can I understand what the sort of background to the changes in those figures are, please? Is it some reduction in terms of support for children's services from the county that's causing that change? Thank you.
As I understand it, the increase in parent reporting is around adolescent to parent violence. So it's actually the parents going to ask for support because the adolescent, their child, is committing the domestic abuse against them. And I think we're seeing increases because parents feel more comfortable with reporting. I think in the past, and obviously don't quote me because I don't have the stats here, parents feel reticent or have felt reticent to report that their child is actually either physically or mentally abusing them. But through a lot of awareness campaigns and support networks, we are seeing a rise in adolescent to parent violence.
And
I think that might be Mr. Perkins. Yeah, it's the wheelchair reversing. I have heard that before.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you both very much for coming along this evening. It's, as I say, it's always a pleasure to have you here. And I hope to see you within the year rather than having to wait a year. But Chief Inspector Corinne Bishop, thank you. The laudable work your team does is fabulous. And like I say, I do see them on a regular basis. So thank you. And for them coming along to me to talk about community priorities and things as well. Very much appreciated. And thank you to your team as well, Sandra, because they're always happy to come out and tackle things on our behalf. So very much appreciated. Thank you. So moving on to our next item, please. So we're coming on to item 7 of the agenda, the development delivery plans. As I mentioned earlier, if we'd like to speak on the exempt appendix, then we will go into exempt and remove any members of the public. So the recommendation is recommended that the Scrutiny Committee comment on the proposals within the attached draft Cabinet Report Ref Cab 3484, which is to be considered by Cabinet at its meeting on the 13th of March. Councillor Todd, come off your phone and come to the table because I believe you're doing our intro. And we have Councillor Lee and Councillor Horrell who would like to speak on this paper. Councillor Lee, would you like to come and speak to us first?
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee. The engagement across the city and the district in shaping this development brief is very welcome. This is a unique opportunity for Winchester, and I acknowledge that the development delivery plan is not the master plan, but rather sets out the what, when, who and how jigsaw will deliver for the sites. I also understand we're not yet at the design stage. My concerns and questions focus on sustainability and the long-term viability of the central Winchester regeneration, particularly regarding the what, which must be robust as possible to inform the future planning and development. And there's lots to like in this paper before scrutiny. And obviously I can't pick up and comment on it all. So I'll just pick up on a few of the critical things which I think are essential for success. The igloo footprint and a few other things are great. And the green-blue infrastructure strategy, I think, is very welcome. This strategy appears critical for the central Winchester's regeneration success, considering the environmental and hidden infrastructure risks and Winchester's complex historic setting around a river. But can I ask, when will the strategy be completed? And how will it inform the master plan? And then thinking about social and economic challenges, the central Winchester regeneration aims to revitalise a deprived area with significant social economic challenges, including a neighbourhood in the 40% most deprived nationally. Given this, I'm surprised that the groundbreaking Ignition project in Manchester, which I have mentioned before as part of the regeneration, is not referenced in this paper. The Ignition project has developed innovative financing solutions for green investment, enhancing urban resilience and supporting businesses by creating high quality green spaces. The evidence is compelling. The nature-based solutions drive economic growth, attract investment and improve public health and social well-being. Just one quick example, street trees near roads and the sustainable urban drainage enabled streets can lead to a 30 to 50% increase and restaurant patronage, a 3-degree air temperature reduction, which is important with increasing heat island as part of climate change, a large amount of carbon sequestration per tree annually, improvements to air quality, crime reduction, biodiversity gains, and improved well-being. So can I ask Jigsaw whether they can create a similar evidence base or better still adapt and adopt the existing Ignition data for the central Winchester regeneration? Leveraging these proven strategies would help tackle the aforementioned. And then a very quick comment on the future-proofing travel and trip generation data, page 242. Seems to rely on lagging indicators as far as I can see, and forgive me if I've missed some elements in this very long briefing paper. It focuses on existing travel patterns rather than what I believe is forecasting future trends in lifestyle and technology changes. And as I say, forgive me if I'm wrong. So how can the central Winchester regeneration future-proofing for changing movement approaches or needs be undertaken? Are there any new evidence that could be pulled on to indicate new mobility patterns for this future development? I'm afraid I believe the Winchester movement strategy for me is not helpful in suggesting how to future-proof this particular regeneration plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, much appreciated. Councillor Horrell, would you like to come forward, please?
Chair, thank you for allowing me to address Scrutiny Committee this evening. And the purpose of my request to speak is to raise questions that I hope the Scrutiny Committee would support raising with officers and the development team this evening. Thank you for the DDP. Some very ambitious overall objectives, but lighter on some of the specifics which many of us are keen to see progress on. I do have a question about the pink exempt paper, Chair, but I'll be guided by you when it might be appropriate to ask this, clearly not at this moment. So some of my questions. Why has the developer needed a further 6 months to check the viability of the project? Is it that their ideas and concepts are just not correct for the city, and so the finances are difficult to make work? How can this site have a negative land value in clause 2.2 when the city is nominated as one of the best places to live in various publications, We have one of the most expensive average house prices in the country, and we're assured by the portfolio holder we have a thriving economy. How will the council bridge the funding gap when important revenue is lost from the rents on buildings that will be removed in the new development, such as Iceland and Poundland? As an indicator of what is to come, can the developer tell us how well the renovation of King's Walk has gone in terms of increased footfall and economic delivery following the significant facelift investment? I'm questioning why such a significant amount of SIL funding has been allocated to this project, paid for by the council, when we know that there are many projects that warrant SIL investment across the district that have not been fulfilled. Can the developer commit to the delivery of the supplementary planning document, as many of you know, dear to my heart, carefully put together in 2018, even though it may not have the same status in planning terms following the recent government regulation changes? How is it that we've waited 7 years and we still do not have designs for us to consider, simply estimates based on typologies and possible usage? And why do we have to wait a further 2 years for a planning application? And that's not for the whole site, only full in part and then part in outline, given that the developer has already been involved for more than 2 years. And is it not a dereliction of council duty that we have not benefited from the land and properties in a more significant way that we own during this time? Where is the interim bus hub to be located? As we know, the buses have been a key point of discussion for many a year. Are we having a bus hub or a station? And what type of facility will we provide to respond to the residents' requirements? Because we know that they expect certain things from us at the bus hub. And when will the micro consolidation site come into operation, which is an excellent idea and actually was recommended several years ago, so I'm very supportive. And is it being recommended for all businesses? And will there be Winchester City Council homes on the site as part of the mixed tenure offer? It was notable in the document that they were not specifically listed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Really appreciate you coming along and asking those important questions this evening. Councillor Todd, would you like to introduce this paper, please? A brief intro would be lovely.
I can be as brief as you want me to be. Not as brief as you want me to be, Councillor Bolt. So Central Winchester Regeneration remains an absolutely vital opportunity to bring new life to the heart of our ancient city. New homes, including new affordable homes, new jobs, new businesses, and to do so in a way that's true to the city, but also true to today. It is a complex process. It is going to bring in millions and millions of pounds of investment, and it's one that we're going to get right. This is not going to be a full start. At the moment, the difficult financial situation nationally means that many regeneration schemes are falling by the wayside. But we are not going to fall by the wayside. That's the decision we're taking today. And while we can all get frustrated on how long it takes to make this kind of project happen, we've had way too many false starts in the past, and there's no prize for going faster if the price is failure. So what happens next? We appointed Jigsaw as our development partner in March 2023, signed the development agreement in April 2024, and that triggered the work for our partner to come forward with a plan that delivers the objectives of our development brief, which incidentally includes the supplementary planning document, and that is one of the objectives that has to be fulfilled, and that's what we're discussing today. So Cabinet is going to be asked to agree the development delivery plan, the infrastructure delivery plan, the public realm delivery plan, the phase delivery plan, and the initial financial model. And I would stress it is an initial financial model. It's not one that's based on detailed costings based on the actual buildings that are likely to be put up. But it will be setting the highest possible standards for an exemplary public realm, green and blue infrastructure, and bus and highway infrastructure. Coming back to the point that was talked about sustainability and social value, we will be using the footprint process, which is exactly designed to make sure that's fully assessed and properly thought about throughout the planning process. And when we talk about building green infrastructure, a core part of the SPD and of the plan for a very long time has been opening up and planting the waterways. There will literally be green and blue infrastructure running through the middle of the site. So what we have in front of us today puts us on the journey for the next stage of the process, as outlined on page 7 of the pack. A master plan later this year, a planning application in late 26 or early 27. I think we have a great roadmap for the way forward in front of us, and I look forward to your questions and views.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. We have Emma Taylor, Ken Bakey and Dawn Adey in the room to answer our questions. So, committee, do we have any questions? Councillor Reach, please.
Thank you. The bulk of this site falls in my ward in St Michael, and the thing I hear repeatedly from residents is, when are we going to see a spade in the ground? I appreciate the comments that the leader just made, but this has been going on a long time. Do we have any idea of when we might start to see the development progressing?
Chair, can I ask maybe if Mr. Woolger could join us from Jigsaw, because conscious there's quite a lot of questions there from different members, but it might actually help the committee to hear from the developer as well as the officers and other members. So I wonder if, with your permission, if that's okay.
Yes, if you'd like to come forward, Mr. Mummery.
So in the pack, and without going to the page, a very long document, there is a programme of activity which the leader just referred to. Those dates in there, it's important to note, are based on the dates in the development agreement. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Woolger from Jigsaw to comment on what they hope to achieve over the next 12 to 18 months.
I apologise, I got your name wrong. I misheard. And so you said Mr. Mummery. This is Matt Woolger.
You wouldn't be the first to.
Why not a G? Apologies.
Yeah. It's equally as challenging to say and get people to spell it correctly as well. So it works both ways.
I couldn't see that either because it was behind Ken's thing. So anyway, my apologies.
So yes, just to give an overview on our initial thoughts on programme. We continue to comply with the objectives and the requirements within the development agreement. Over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be finalising with our design team the exact run through that we'll be going through the RIBA stages. But at every step along the way, we will be targeting dates in advance of the various milestone dates that sit within the development agreement. Certainly the first of those being the 24 months to a planning application. I feel quite confident that with the exemplary design team that we're working with, and all of the groundwork that we've done to date, I feel quite confident that we'll be able to improve on that. I wouldn't like to sit here today and commit to a date in advance of that, but rest assured, as we launch into our sort of next phase of engagement, we will be setting out our key stakeholder engagement dates as well as our target planning application date, which will be within the milestones set out in the development agreement.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Reach?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I think it would be really helpful if we could, I mean, the presentation is brilliant and it's so full of detail, but it'd be great if those headlines were on the council website. This is probably the embarrassing moment when you say they are, but something that residents can see at a glance. This is what's going to happen next. That would be tremendously helpful.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. So, lots of information, trying to reflect on, trying to get the sense of where all this is going and understand the dynamics involved. The one part of it for me that I didn't sort of get a sense of whether there was an evidence base for whether it was a primary focus of the project, because when you go back to the 6 dimensions of the project and all that sort of thing, the one thing for me that I felt didn't scream out at me was its contribution to economic vibrancy and how that will be enhanced, that is a key focus of, you know, the project, and that, you know, it will improve visitors' experience and footfall as a result. And I note that, you know, from the SPD there was a shift in the sort of land use. You know, you've got a bit more mixed use and less retail. And what I'm not clear about and need some a bit of explanation around is that determination to make Winchester an economically vibrant city for the future, taking into consideration those changes in retail trends and experiences that people are looking for. If you could help me out with that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to address that one. So I think with the 6 dimensions, I suppose we're referring back to footprint, and I think in my view there would be that would sit very much within the category of place. Good places are vibrant, are, you know, successful economically, and so on and so forth, and very active. So I would consider that as something that lives within the place category of our footprint process. In terms of mix and use and those sorts of things, it's our obligation to comply with the design brief that sits as one of the first appendices in the development agreement. I think that probably answers the question.
And perhaps I can just add, I think one of the things that the document does talk about is not just the area within the red line, but actually how it interacts and connects to the wider city, be that the high street or going further north into Middlebrook Street and beyond the car park and beyond. So those connections into the wider area are just as important, I think, in terms of the way that Jigsaw are approaching that design and how the new part of the city can then fit and contribute to the wider objectives of the city and the wider economy. There is, within the scheme, there is space for digital creatives. Creative economy is one of the critical things in the development objectives that was issued when Jigsaw were procured, and that space is within the document. So there's opportunities that will be created which currently don't exist. They've been doing a lot of work on the creative sector and what type of space they require, because there isn't a lot of it in Winchester, believe it or not. We have a high performing creative sector, and we're not talking just artists and the artistic community, but this is the digital marketing, the creative sector there, that people would need certain types of infrastructure and certain space that they currently are telling Jigsaw they can't currently access. So that will create opportunities for employment and activity in that area during the day, not just from more residential homes.
Yeah, I think that the key point here is that places thrive because of what they see around. You know, the public realm will help the place thrive. The ground floor uses, which are specifically called out as a priority, are what keep places an active and vibrant. But it is actually important also to have people in the centre as well. And it's one of the things I'd like to see more of, is that we're, You know, there's bits of the high street where I would love more housing above the shops to be brought back into the use, because if you have those people in the centre, and it also becomes good housing for like young people to access. You know, it's maybe not brilliant for families, but it's a good way of bringing people into the centre and helping keep it vibrant, you know, 24/7, 365. So it is part of an overall scheme. You know, everything that's in here will be supplementing, is intended to help the place thrive. And I think the point that's been made, which is incredibly important, is we're not trying to create a new place that's separate from the rest of Winchester. This is about expanding the footprint of what makes Winchester great, and taking some of the areas that don't make Winchester great and trying to make them more like the areas that do. That's very much the thinking that's we're trying to bring to life with what's in front of us.
I agree. And I guess my concern is really the explicit nature of what I'm saying. It's implicit, I accept that none of us want to create, you know, you've regenerated nothing if it's a damp squib at the end of it, you know. And I felt on reflection, we could get to a point where you can tick all those 6 objectives, dimensions, whatever they were called, off. And economically, it might not be quite washing its face as it needed to. And that was the bit that, on reflection, concerned me, that we needed to be more explicit and measured. You know, as they say, if it's not measured, it doesn't happen. And if there was a way of improving the measure of its economic vibrancy going forward with the project, because I accept that the DDP is a living document and that can evolve, and I think something explicit on that point would be helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is a really exciting development for the city. The area's been dormant for too long, as we've heard, but it's clear that a lot of work's gone into reaching this stage. I spent several hours reading through all the pack, and it was quite generic at the start, and I was slightly sceptical, and then we got more and more detailed. And actually, by the end, I was really impressed compared to some of the other documents that have come before us. I thought it was very good. It was particularly on movement. It was refreshing to see a clear, honest appraisal of where we are with walking and cycling and public transport infrastructure in Winchester. And I was really interested to see you put it down as a car-free development. We've had other people who've come before this committee who've said we can't possibly develop anything in Winchester without putting car parking spaces there. So it has been really refreshing to see a different view. Right, sorry, I was meant to ask a question.
Please.
Sorry. Unfortunately, I'm going to ask a bit of a nasty one, because I don't think this is going to happen, but I want to kind of. So if the project got to the planning stage, or indeed any other interim stage, and then Jigsaw pulled out, who owns the work performed up to that date? So the detailed design. If this all kind of falls apart at any point, you know, what are we left with? And I'm sorry to ask a negative question, but it's, you know.
Under the terms of the DA, the council can ask for that work, to own that work. There would, I dare say, be a negotiation about cost of that work. It's a significant venture that Jigsaw are about to undertake. This is a significant step for them to have the development delivery plan approved. They have their own governance processes. They require the council to approve the DDP as under the terms of the development agreement. That is an important issue for their boards, the 2 boards that make up the joint venture team, to actually then release funding. So there's a significant cost to that planning application, but there are provisions in the DA for the council to own that intellectual property, if that's the right word, but there will be a cost to it probably.
Thank you. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. I've got several questions I need to clarify in my own mind, if you don't mind. Going on from the conversation you just had now, what happens if we get halfway through the project and you decide that the rest of it's not viable and want to pull out?
That was pretty much the same question Councillor Wallace just asked that was answered.
No, I'm talking about the financial implications if we've built half of it and then the other half doesn't get built. That's really what.
So just so I understand the question, if we build half of it and then the second, so we've got in the document, it talks about phase A and phase B. Are you suggesting that we build phase A, but phase B doesn't happen?
Yeah.
There are, again, provisions in there for the scheme not being completed, and that would end up with Jigsaw, I think, in a default position under the terms of the development agreement. I'm not really comfortable saying much more because I suspect that was all redacted previously when it was approved at full council.
Yeah, I mean, if all we're talking about.
Sorry to interrupt. We have 3 microphones on. Councillor Laming, can you switch off your microphone? Thank you, Councillor.
What you're touching on here is the content of the development agreement, okay, which is something that was agreed a year ago, and that has a whole set of guarantees and arrangements to make sure that the council is protected and to a degree that the development partner is protected at every stage of the process. So if we're all behaving reasonably, you know, we reasonably give planning applicant permission if they've met the terms of our brief, then there is the risk is managed. So for example, the land doesn't get handed over until there's a agreed planning application. You know, we don't just like give them the whole site and say off you go, and then if they can do what they want. There are careful phasing throughout the process, which ensures that the council's interests are protected and that the developer's interests are protected. You know, we are the agreement to this plan is an agreement that they're going to deliver this plan, and that is going to cost them a significant amount of money, and so we have to behave reasonably from this point onwards, and they have to behave reasonably. But if we do that, then the assumption is that we'll move towards a point where, you know, the construction work starts. And there are different, I can't remember the exact term that's used, but essentially there are levels of agreement that happen, you know, when planning permission is given, when business cases are agreed, when building starts, and all of these different things, there's different sort of protections for the council, so that if something goes wrong in that process, if something maybe happens to a parent company or something like that, then we're all broadly protected and we come out sort of where we should be with the costs that each or the other has incurred protected. And importantly, for example, we just touched on it in an earlier question, things like the intellectual property that's been developed does revert to the council. So it's an attempt at a fair development agreement, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're operating within the constraints of the agreement that we have in place. But you know, in the end, we are asking Jigsaw to invest a very large sum of money. You know, I think it's an 8-figure sum. No, 7, 8, 9. Anyway, a lot, 8-figure sum in this project, and so making sure that they're protected, but also that we're protected as we go through the process is essentially what we agreed when the development agreement was signed off. If there is a need for the Scrutiny Committee to, you know, get a briefing on the contents of the development agreement, or if there's a need for a refresh on that, I'm sure it can be arranged as a member briefing or something like that. But I can assure you that, you know, the protections are in place for the City Council, and protections are in place for our development partner as well.
The other part of the question that comes to mind is you're talking about developing King's Walk side first. That's a side where the council get revenue. So wouldn't it be better to start on the bus station side where we wouldn't be affecting their revenue so much?
We have set out our initial thoughts with regards to phasing in the development delivery plan, and that there are a few reasons for us ultimately focusing on what's referred to as Parcel A, which is sort of that side of the site. Parcel B carries some constraints which have a much longer timescale for resolution that aren't immediately within our sort of day one control. We are very interested in ongoing conversations with the Environment Agency with regards to the opening up of the culvert, and that reflects the commitments that are set out with regards to that blue infrastructure running through the site. The Environment Agency discussions will take some time. We can't predict exactly how long that will take, and therefore it kind of makes sense for us to focus on another part of the site initially. However, if it early days we make sufficient progress that we're able to reconsider that phasing decision, it remains open, and the development delivery plan is a document that is reviewed on a quarterly basis with officers, and the phasing of the project will always be under review.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think this is a lifetime opportunity for Winchester, obviously, but could I just ask about seal monies, if I may, in respect of CWR? And I asked whether it is fair that such a big chunk of money is to be used exclusively on this development, and or can it and will it, some of it, be diverted into the district, i.e. the rural areas? Thank you.
So let me pick up the wider point about SIL. There is a SIL panel. They look after applications for SIL, and so they rely on people coming forward with applications for SIL, and it is available to the whole district. And the reason for putting this recommendation in the paper for Central Winchester is largely because we are actually asking the developer to spend do a lot of things that probably the developer would not normally have to do. So relocating buses, Mr. Wilger's already talked about opening up a waterway, a really significant cost that everybody would like to see, but what other developers would say is a very large abnormal cost. Public realm to the exemplary standards, and we don't use that word lightly because that's what the city really deserves. It is in the conservation area, the whole site is in the conservation area. So there's a lot of additional costs that we want, or things that we want to happen, which are identified in the SPD. And so we're asking for the Cabinet to make this allocation, ring fencing, whatever words you want to use, and then jigsaw, depending on how things go financially in the run up to and beyond the planning application, will then determine how much and when those applications will come forward. It is in their financial plan for the development, and we can maybe get into that if we do go into an exempt session, but there are additional costs for this site that really do justify, I think, certainly in the officer's opinion, that additional funding going in to make this happen to the standard we all want it to happen to. I don't know what Mr. Wilger wants to add to that, some of those points as well.
I think actually, Ken, you probably covered everything there. It is, there is a burden on the development. Just to adopt a bit of developer speak for a moment, there are infrastructure works that will be there as a public benefit to the wider public, to the district as well as the city, that community infrastructure levy is meant to contribute towards, and it is contributing, not paying for all of those elements. I would defer to officers to scrutinise us further on those costs as the applications come in over the course of the development.
I'd like to come to Mrs. Zadie at this point, if I can.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add for you, Councillor Clare, that it is a significant amount, but it doesn't empty the seal pot for other project. So there are it's sort of got a bit of a cash flow going into the SIL and as we take things out. So there is there's still money left. It will be detailed in the report in the SIL for other projects across the district, and we'll be very aware how much has been spent in one area when allocating to other areas. And also this site generates an amount of SIL as it develops, and that comes back into the council. So it sort of in at the front and then out at the end, and they're not dissimilar amounts on its generation. So it will sort of replenish itself. We're also ring fencing this SIL. It's the best word I can use, but it sits with the council until it's ready to use. We're not handing over the SIL to the developers to sit in their bank account until they've actually done the work or are on the way with doing the work, and then we deal with it as we go. So it's not leaving the council just yet. It's just being ring fenced for spend.
Councillor Wallace.
Just wanted to pick up on this. As you know, more or less all the SIL that's been collected in Winchester City has already been spent on improving infrastructure in Winchester City. So allocating 4.5 million of SIL to this project means that you're proposing to use SIL money that's been collected in the market towns and rural areas for improving infrastructure in the city. Also, per para 15.4b, there is intended to be a further request for an undisclosed amount of SIL monies in the future. So I think perhaps this is a question for Councillor Todd. Can you explain to our residents why you're choosing to spend SIL monies on Winchester City rather than improving infrastructure in areas where the development has occurred?
Well, first of all, there's no rather than in it. You know, there's not a question that we've refused applications for SIL elsewhere in the district in order to make this possible. As far as I'm aware, not a single one has been refused to make this possible. And indeed, one of the things I put in place in the SIL process with colleagues is specifically ring fencing for the kind of highways improvements, for example, which is now a separate fund, this is hardly touching, which I know are very important right across the district. And I think it's important to say that this is, you know, we know that people come over from all over Hampshire and all over the country, frankly, to Winchester. And as a result of extra building, not just in Winchester, but actually more widely, that number is going up. And so the ability to create spaces that help us deal with that pressure is very important. I would love to see more SIL being spent in the rest of the district. This does not stop that happening, quite the opposite. And certainly, you know, every now and again, I have regular conversations with leadership at Hampshire to say, what can we do to unblock the kind of highways improvements that we are desperate to get in place? Essentially, what will it take for us to be able to accelerate that kind of work? So I'm with you in wanting to get more SIL projects away in the rest of the district. And I want to assure you that this project is not the reason why it's not happening.
I just wanted to say on that, Councillor Todd, while I don't think things have been refused to allow this, I have requested 2 years on the trot that the SIL budget that goes out for the applications in the annual cycle be increased, and it hasn't been. And over that 2 years, actually, the amount that's allocated to that budget for the projects to bid for, in real terms, has decreased significantly due to inflation. So please, could I call on you to support me in asking that that overall budget that gets put for grants to the rest of the district to bid for money, that pot is increased this year? I know we've just missed this cycle, but
I can't make that promise right now, but it's a very reasonable request. I'm happy to take it away. And I'm also happy to take away the question of whether there are other mechanisms we can use in addition to that to get the kind of spending across the rest of the district that we'd like to see, and in particular the new Hampshire, you know, the highways fund we've effectively created for dealing with those kind of extra pressures. I'm very happy to take as an action, you know, a follow up. As you can imagine, I'm talking to Nick Adams King pretty frequently currently. I'm very happy to say, you know, if we get a moment from worrying about if we get a moment away from worrying about local government reorganisation, can we have another look at SIL, then very happy to keep pushing on that.
Well, that of course is part of my concern, is that once we have the local government reorganisation, if we have this massive pot of still there, I know it will still be allocated to projects, but it may go even further afield. We don't know what I don't know.
No, I think it's one of those things that we will need to, I mean, it is quite a long time before we get to that point, and it's one of those things that we will need to look at in terms of how it works. I think, I mean, Mrs. Adey may be able to provide some policy perspective on that, but I think it won't be possible to just suddenly start. It's been collected on a certain basis, and if you don't spend it on that basis, I think you can get in all kinds of trouble. But Mrs. Adey is more of an expert than I am.
I'll take that this evening. Thank you, Lisa. You're absolutely right. I know you know this. The ring fencing on what you can spend on SIL has limitations, and I just wanted to concur that we're continuing to look at this to see if the strategy that we put in place last year to split into 3 funds: community, travel and transport, and then general, was working, and we were getting a fair share into those funds. I would say apologies for not knowing the exact timing, but this year's community fund I don't think has been to us yet, into cabinet yet. I think it's coming next time. And that fund was actually slightly over provisioned for, and rather than turn something down, we've added some money to the pot. So we are being as flexible as we can.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question, then I'll come to you, Councillor Pett. My turn. I just wanted to come on to just a brief question that Councillor Horrell asked regarding council homes on the site, Winchester City Council homes. Do we have an intent to provide Winchester City Council homes as part of the regeneration?
We are exploring that option, yes.
So currently it's our intent, and we're doing a viability on that.
We're working with Sam Hendy and his team and New Homes team on can we get to a figure that works for everybody.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to the bus station, which is well past its sell-by date, and yes, it's great to see that it's going to be redeveloped as part of this. And the bus is that the future transport interchange at the station with that piece of redevelopment will be precisely that, an interchange. Most people who come to Winchester by bus, and indeed by long distance coach, would wish to be alighting at some clear, the word hub has been used before, transport hub, roughly Broadway, somewhere like that, not dumped in a back street or a series of bus stops elsewhere. The reason that the bus station is way past its sell-by date is because buses have always been a sort of Cinderella mode of transport. But if they get the right investment and look at the 64 for Alresford that now runs additional services that support the nighttime economy at the weekends, the demographic that uses that service is changing because of that investment. Look at long distance coaches who currently have a Ryanair solution for Winchester, book to Winchester, get dumped at junction 10 of the M3. We need to accommodate those as well. I would hope that your proposals for dealing with buses can be revisited, and at some point in that scheme we can do something rather better than a string of bus stops through several streets, and do something that will play up to the strengths of future bus services along the lines of the 64 as it currently is, in the hope that they will be in future, certainly by the time this development is completed, there'll be low emission, there'll be hopefully more of a mode of choice for more people, and potentially part of the growth agenda as well.
Let me start and then ask Mr. Wilger to contribute. It won't come as a surprise to you, committee, to say that we've been spending a lot of time with bus operators, Stagecoach and Blue Triangle, the County Council, and this is not just about central Winchester. This is about how does the proposals up at Station Approach sit with a bus strategy for the city. It has taken up probably the biggest amount of Jigsaw's consultants' time because it is so critical to the future. I don't think we're completely there yet because it has only been 6 months or so that these guys have been working on this, but what we've got is very clear approaches from both the bus companies who would like their buses to be moving, not sat in a bus station. That's how they see the future of the buses in Winchester. Yes, their drivers will need layover space, and that could be in the centre here, or it could be up at the station approach sites as well. There is additional capacity up at the station that we know of from the work we've been doing there. And I think once we get into the design phase, you will start seeing some options come through. We've been doing a lot of work around testing turning circles. How can you fit buses into certain areas? But buses are on streets. That's how they operate. But they need to be in places where people want to use them and find them easy to access. I'll ask Mr. Wilger to add anything if he wishes.
I think all I would say is, or add to that is, buses are friends. Actually, I think it's an important part of a sustainable travel solution, and I fully acknowledge the councillor's comment there that people want buses to take them to the places they want to go, and they also want access to buses to depart from the same location. So it's not our intention to exclude that as a consideration from all of our development plans as they emerge.
Yeah, I would say, because I think the plan you're referring to must be the 2021 bus provision strategy, which is mentioned in the document as one of the potential solutions. If you look at the page 250 of the pack, 158 of the report, there is a very active project to say we need to do much better than that. And I think that is the intention. And I think one of the things that I've banged on about for an awfully long time is it needs to be where people are and where they want to go. And obviously this redevelopment project, regeneration project, will extend the footprint of that. But the most popular bus stops are not the ones at the bus station. They're the ones in, as I understand it, the ones in Silver Hill. And frankly, they need a better design and a better arrangement in that street as well. So I think we need to. I'm quite an obsessive about this. I'm absolutely convinced, and I think it's the sort of direction of travel. It's the way that Matt and the team are thinking about that we're going to do better than the 2021 study, very much so. We've pushed on the plans for the station. And maybe another thing I put on my list of things that we're going to talk to with the county is to say we need to start actually putting a bit of a rocket up the work for the buses in the rest of the city as well, because one of the biggest barriers in bus usage isn't where the stops are. It's the fact that we have so much congestion in the centre and lack of bus priority that it becomes an unreliable service, and so people stop using it unless they have to. And so, we need a whole system approach for the city. And that's the other thing just to mention in passing, which is it's been great to see how Jigsaw are really team players on this, and they do look beyond their boundary, and they're looking to the wider discussions that are going on about bus services to make sure that they're able to support that in the work that's happening within their footprint.
Thank you.
If I may just quickly add, National Express not mentioned at all. They were banished from the city centre several years ago. They need to come back.
That was my project. And the reason we did it is National Express buses are absolutely enormous, and there isn't space for them to turn safely in the Broadway. And that's the fundamental problem. And they absolutely don't want to go on the timetable they're on. They absolutely do not want to go through the one-way system. It's hard to exaggerate how much they don't want to go through the one-way system. And that's why they ended up where they are. But if you travel on a National Express bus, you have free use of park and ride buses wherever you want to go. So although it does put you out at the St Catherine's Park and Ride, it does also give you a free ride into town. And if you if you don't like being on buses, you probably wouldn't have been on a National Express in the first place.
So Councillor Reach next.
Thank you. We've talked a little bit about local government reform. I guess my question is, there's been a long gestation period for this project, and we're recommending the Cabinet approves the updated version of the DDP. We know local government reorganisation is going to happen. We know that responsibilities which currently lie with districts and counties are going to move elsewhere. We're not quite sure where. So my question is twofold. Is the county, you know, are we happy that this is resilient to those changes which we have some idea are coming down the line? And then the other thing, which would be a bit more interesting actually, is if we're in a unitary authority, which the government's white paper says we will be, where we have responsibility for planning and highways and all sorts of things, are we missing any opportunities that might be possible? So I guess that, just to repeat that, the 2 points: one, is it resilient to the change? And two, could we do better if we were in a unitary, which we think we will be?
So first question, let me take the first part. We will have a planning application to Winchester City Council for Winchester City Council's planning committee to make a decision on. So that will stand us in good stead going into any local government reorganisation. So that permission goes with land. So that is an important thing to do, and that's what Chigs are intending to do. In terms of opportunities, I think there is an opportunity because highways planning currently dealt with by two different authorities. We will be that would be dealt with by the one authority in that place. So the opportunities there for working in the same organisation, I would say, is a benefit going forward.
And I mean the timing. The other area where there will be change and possibly an opportunity is that devolution, which is going to happen in 2026, means that there will be a mayor of Hampshire and Solent who has greater influence on Homes England funding, including regeneration funding. So that is potentially an opportunity. I think people will be looking for an opportunity to make an impact quite quickly, and I think we'll be in a well placed to deal with that. As has been talked about, local government reorganisation will mean that some of the complexities of talking about highways and planning and parking and various other things and how they all fit together, and buses, will suddenly be one council in dealing with that. So there are definitely opportunities there as far as this is concerned. There will be challenges as well, you know, but we can't really know. We're still some way away of knowing, you know, the exact shape of what we're up against and the exact situation that we'll be in.
Thank you. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. First, going back to the buses, can I make a plea that we have organised bus routes in Winchester which are sensible? At the moment, we've got places like Badger Farm, which has got a good bus service. The other side of the Badger Farm Road, Oliver's Battery, you've got nothing really. There's nothing in the valley. They've cancelled all that over the years. And
sorry, I'm going to interrupt on that one. I don't think we can help as Winchester. That's the private business decision.
No, but they have Hampshire haven't actually helped, and I think we need to make representation to that. If we want people to move away from private cars to buses, we've got to provide a good bus service. At the moment, if you want to catch a bus on Oliver's Battery, you have to drive somewhere to catch a bus, which is not, frankly, sensible.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a limit to what we can do on this project. Again, there will be major opportunities because in theory, with devolution, because there will be certain powers for how the bus system is organised, which are not currently available to our
Sorry, can you take this bit offline? I'm really aware of time. We need to stick to what's in this paper, not stray too far into devolution. Thank you.
The other point is that if you look at the overall plan of what we're doing, it looks great, apart from there's a chunk in the middle that we're not developing. And I would have thought it'd been sensible to develop the whole area, because at the moment you're not included the car park that Marks and Spencer's have, or St Clement's Surgery, and that breaks the whole development up into two sections, really.
that is a consequence of the journey that we started on some time ago. Again, the decision not to include the Middlebrook Street car park was taken 2 years ago, and it's not one that's easy to reverse now. I hear what you're saying. We're unfortunately not, we've decided not to go for a model where we're using compulsory purchase or other such things in order to have a unified plan for the entire site. And so we are to a degree dependent on independent market decisions in terms of how areas within the site are handled. I don't know if there's any further perspective from. Compulsory purchase was something that was talked about. I think it's actually, dare I say it, it's banned by the SPD. Not that SPDs can ban a decision to make compulsory purchase. I think it was partly a product of the Silver Hill experience, because there's a very particular process that you need to go down. And in particular, I think you need to have a completed planning application for the area that you want to compulsorily purchase, because you need to be able to say what you're going to do with it. And it was just a route that we didn't want to follow.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Horrell's question about understanding the dynamics around footfall. She mentioned King's Walk, and it was in fact the subject of Councillor Todd's award for the longest supplementary question at full council last week that I managed to grapple from Councillor Lee from the previous one thing. My concern at the moment around footfall generally is that we are seeing a national decline in footfall in city centres. 2% nationally. There's a survey of some 60 odd cities recently, big meaningful cities, 5%. Well, that is an enormous impact on the dynamics, and it comes back to that economics consideration. What I'm not seeing in any of the documentation at the moment is any reflection or studies on the implications of that and how we are managing, the changing dynamics around visitors. And why is that? Or is that going on at another stage? But I think it's something that we have to be very conscious of, and that this could end up with a development that doesn't get many visitors if we're building it in the wrong way. And it's back to that. I totally get it, what you say, Councillor Todd, about, building something that's attractive to people, and there's an underlying vision for economic vibrancy. But it comes back to those things about how do we measure it? How do we make sure that we understand the dynamics? Because this is going to take a long time to build. And when we get there, if we've built the wrong thing, yeah.
Councillor Bolton, thank you for that question. Whether you've also won the longest question of the night tonight. Who'd like to pick this one up?
Shall I start, and then again maybe hand over to Mr. Roger? So we do have footfall figures for Winchester City. Unfortunately, we can't disaggregate them, because we have tried to look and see how many people were going through and using the new Friars Gate Park. But so we have a global figure for the whole city, but we can't disaggregate them. I go back to my previous answer about the legibility of the place and what there's been built, and the connections to the surrounding area are as important, I think, for Jigsaw and their design team to understand where people are moving from the north, the southeast and the west through to their site, and indeed are they moving from those areas. We know people move from Middlebrook Street car park along Middlebrook Street to the High Street. That's the biggest flow of people. But they will look at that with their design teams, I'm sure, because they need some active frontages for people with footfall for those places to work.
Yeah, I echo that, and all I would add to that was just, it probably will live within the section of the development delivery plan, market understanding, and I think as we iterate the development delivery plan throughout the planning process, I think an important part to really inform that is that design process. We need to get into this design process so that we can engage and we can kind of develop the rationale, research, and so on and so forth to support the uses that live within those incredibly important active edges. So I expect it's a significant part of the development delivery plan that will evolve.
I think the other theme that we've talked about is flexibility, so that you're not building buildings that can't be repurposed. I mean, one of the things I love to say is that, you know, the medieval masons who designed the cellars of St John's House had no idea that they were designing a fantastic cocktail bar, because at the time they weren't. But a few centuries later, it turned out they had. And so actually one of the really important points in this is we need to make sure that we have buildings that are flexible and can be repurposed. And if we don't get things right, we haven't painted ourselves into a corner where there's no flexibility for the future. But I think, you know, if you look at, I mean, I think a good way to look at it is when footfall is in so much trouble, why does Winchester outperform it at other places? And it is because it's beautiful. It's because it's walkable. You know, there's a whole set of, it's because, you know, it's varied. It has a whole set of things going for it. It has a good food and beverage offer. It has good special, you know, the type of shops which you can't order, get delivered, the kind of things they sell, where that human interaction and that experience and seeing things and feeling things and smelling things is part of the offer. And so I think that's, you know, we need, one of the things about Winchesterness that we talk about within is that Winchesterness is one of the things that helps our town, our city compete and do well versus other places, and why it's actually so important to try and bottle what is making our city do so well and make sure that we're reapplying that to the new development.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to a question that Councillor Lee asked earlier on, related to the Ignition project in Manchester. I know, I believe Councillor Lee's raised this several times, so I just wanted to check, have we looked into this, and if we have, how have plans been adjusted, or do we think there's further opportunity for doing more based on that project? Thank you.
So Councillor Lee has raised it before, and I think he's right. There are opportunities. We need to get a bit further on into the detail of the design before we actually can then start applying that. You know, Jigsaw, one half of Jigsaw, Igloo Regeneration, is a B Corp. They are very interested in this whole sector. I hope you can see that demonstrated in the document. They talk about nature, they talk about climate change a lot. They talk about car-free development in the city centre, and that's challenging from other people's perspectives, but they are really behind that. They've commissioned a piece of work from consultants around funding opportunities, and they will continue to do this because funding it and developing it in the way the City Council wants is challenging for all sorts of reasons. So I'm sure we will get into. Specifically, I don't know if Matt wants to say anything specifically about it. Or
You don't have to.
All I was going to add is, it's a project I look forward to delving into and taking learnings from. We really welcome those sorts of introductions.
Thank you.
The one thing I'd say is Winchester is actually well known for its very high level of green spaces and tree cover, and you could make a case that the Ignition project was a project to make Manchester more like Winchester.
Oh, fancy that. Councillor Baffo.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back to the section on movement, in which you refer obviously to the Winchester Movement Strategy, which was approved in 2019. You also refer to a number of other projects, the LC whip and consolidation, various sort of reorganisation of traffic routes, and cycling and walking facilities. Just interested in how much of that do you think will be part of your responsibility as the developers to provide, and how much of it will you be seeing as being outside of your remit and a dependency in terms of being provided to you to ensure the success of this development?
Our obligations are largely governed by what's set out within the development agreement, and our sort of primary contribution to this within the red line of what we govern is to facilitate the interim bus movement strategy. And we continue to sort of contribute through workshops and so on and so forth with a stakeholder group to arrive at the best possible solution for that. There's more work to be done, but we have spent a lot of time looking at it. With regards to other strategies and connections, I think our largest role here is to respond to the wider highways network and make sure that we integrate. And yeah, I wouldn't have thought that it was a general expectation that the development was able to fund these initiatives. We're trying to dovetail in at the heart of many of these initiatives and to complement the work that the Highways Authority is also bringing forward.
Thank you. I was just going to ask one last question before we go on to debate, because I'm aware we've talked quite a lot about some of the detail, and we're here primarily to influence some of the strategy. This may come out better under the exempt paper, but it was something Councillor Horrell raised, actually, isn't it, in the exempt paper about the negative land value. I don't know if you'd rather pick that up under the exempt piece or pick that up now.
Can I pick it up in this session by saying and being very clear, we're only 1 to 2% away from being positive. At this stage of a project, that is not very much. I know it's a big sum of money, and we can talk about that in the next session, but being 1 to 2% away before you even put in an architect's pen to paper, if they still do that these days, is not very significant. My experience, the development consultants who we have retained throughout the process of procurement and currently are also telling us that we are not in a bad place. It is negative and we can't get away from that, and that's why we've been upfront in the paper. The exempt item tells you by how much, but that represents 1 to 2% of the gross spend by Jigsaw. So it is not very far away.
Thank you, much appreciated.
So, Councillor, could I just add that was one of the reasons why Jigsaw asked for the 6-month extension to submitting the DDP, so that they could submit an initial financial model that was in an arena where we could all work with that figure. As Mr. Bakey has said, the 1 to 2% is something that we're all very comfortable with now.
Thank you, much appreciated. I'm aware there were other questions that Councillor Lee and Councillor Horrell raised that we haven't covered from their sessions. Councillor Todd, are you happy to address if they have any particular concerns they'd like to take up with you and the officers? Are you happy to have that conversation outside of this?
We've just done a member briefing, but that's fine. We go back round now. Now you've got the papers, it's easier to see, isn't it? So we can go back round either with a member briefing or a separate. We've also got a public briefing.
So we've got a public briefing, public forum being scheduled for the 2nd of April.
I'm very happy to take questions in the meantime. Always happy to discuss that.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. So who would like to ask questions on the exempt paper? Yes, so could somebody propose we're going to exempt, please? Yep, thank you. do we have any debate? Welcome back, Mr. Walker. Yes, do we have any debate on this? And I don't want everybody to say thank you for all your hard work, blah, 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 because I'll do that at the end. Do we have any debate? Excellent. Thank you for all of your hard work bringing this paper forward. I think we've asked lots of questions that hopefully are useful. The only point I've really got to take forward, and I know you've just mentioned that you're doing a public briefing, but it was the dissemination of the information and, you know, to keep updated on the website for any particularly fervent members of the public to feel that they're still informed and the like. So that was the only real point I had on this. I just wanted to clarify on that. Is there an update on the website, or will that follow the public briefing?
I think it will follow the public briefing, both on the council's website, but Jigsaw have been using Commonplace, but I'm not sure if that's going to continue, but there will be a place for this to happen. There is lots of work there, as you've seen, around engagement, and the intention is that that continues as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming down to see us, and you may now go and get your train home.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving on to item 8 of our agenda, Q3 finance and performance monitoring. It's the recommendation that the Scrutiny Committee raise with the Deputy Leader or relevant Cabinet member any issues arising from the information into report, ref CAB 3493, which is again being presented to Cabinet on the 13th of March. And considers whether any items of significance to resolve and be drawn to the attention of the Cabinet. Again, I would like to just reinforce that we're looking at strategic points of clarity on this, rather than just picking out detail and asking detail type questions. Councillor Lee, I believe you wanted to come and speak to us on this one.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask the question about the insufficient scale or pace to meet the annual CO2 equivalent targets set in the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan to achieve the district carbon neutral target by 2030. So I'd just like to register my concern and ask how these major risks to the project, this programme, will be dealt with. It's not clear. I appreciate this is a backward-looking Q3 report, but I would have hoped we might have seen something, for example, in climate emergency progress on page 425, which shows some big objectives for the future: doorstep waste collections, increasing recycling, increasing our recycling rates, and there's also the nutrient neutrality mitigation measures. So obviously those are 3 key programs for the climate emergency plan. But then when you go to page 421, it refers to LED lighting replacements at Chesil Car Park to be delivered and completed. That would suggest it's underway, and perhaps these and others like the Winchester District Nature Improvement Plan and the local area energy plan, which merit capture under the climate energy progress. So really, I mean, it's strategic in the sense that we would like to see this in the what's coming up, and it's mentioned, so why not spell it out? And back to what I probably would call a big strategic thought, and it's a worry, is that we are expecting to see a 62% increase in the number of houses and infrastructure as part of the next local plan, as part of the new National Planning Policy Framework targets. So my question is, should we not be seeing an adjustment now in the district carbon delivery targets? In other words, front loading to mitigate what's coming down the line. And I can calculate this, you know, it's 60,000 tonnes. It's a 62% increase in housing. And of course, we're only going to start picking that up to the back end of this decade. Nevertheless, we knew this in December, so I would have thought we might have had some indication. So I think this is a significant issue that warrants being registered as an action for the next quarter and being presented to Cabinet, if I might suggest. And then on the nutrient mitigation solution, I'm not going to say very much other than to say, I think at HEP we discussed briefly a question about nutrient neutrality measures and how they can be improved. I suggest that's a strategic issue, and I look forward to understanding how that might be taken forward. And given that and some of the other concerns, why is that RAG rated green? And then on the future of waste and recycling, we had an excellent update from Councillor Learning, the waste officer at HEP. But the question that was not asked at HEP was, what are the suppliers doing in terms of assessing the whole life carbon impacts through the supply chain, carbon costs for the rollout of these changes? It's the question, it doesn't seem to be there. It doesn't seem to be evident. So I suggest, again, that may be an action for the next quarter in terms of thinking. And then we just talked about the Central Winchester regeneration on page 446. And given the importance of that project and the need for transparency, why wouldn't we pull through some of the key ingredients to show progress in this particular part of the performance report? We could pick up on anything, green, blue infrastructure strategies, maybe the financial indicators and some other key sustainability considerations. So just a thought on some of what I see as some issues of omission, which I think could be added for completing a more rounded performance report and perhaps in the next quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'm sure some of those points will be picked up as we go through the questioning. Right, so I'm going to break this down by topic. So firstly, would you like to do an intro, Councillor Todd?
I have something written out for me, but I'm just going to say, you know how the report works. It highlights our achievements in that quarter. The most valuable bit of the conversation will be the questions you ask, rather than me telling you what's in the paper you've already read. So I suggest we get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Very much appreciated. So, climate emergency. Do we have any questions? Councillor Reach.
Thank you. Referring to page 420, can we clarify that we talk about in-scope emissions? We've had this discussion countless times. Could we just clarify what we actually count as our carbon emissions? That would be really helpful, please.
Yes, the ones that are comparable versus other authorities are scope 1 and scope 2, as it says, i.e. the things where scope 1 is basically where you burn something itself and you personally and directly put carbon into the atmosphere. Scope 2 is when you buy something that, like electricity or gas, which puts carbon, no, sorry, not gas, that's scope 1, into the atmosphere. And then scope 3 is where you kind of trigger, through your contracts or other things, carbon in other places. And the problem you often get is that scope 3 is the one you can't really compare. So we include the buses that we subsidise. Hampshire doesn't, for example. We include our waste collection service. Hampshire doesn't include its waste disposal service. So the reason that we focus in on scope 1 and 2 are those are the ones we control directly and where we can have the biggest impact. Although in practice we've also made major reductions to scope 3. It's a huge priority to cut that as well. So that's how it works. And we're also very proud of the 40% reduction we've achieved in that area as well. There are very few authorities that can be claimed to be making that kind of progress.
Anything else, Councillor Wallace?
Yes, just picking up on Councillor Lee's point on the district carbon emissions. The text states that the carbon neutral target is a major risk, but traffic lights show green and amber. The page 427 says a progress tracker shows a revised target of 520 kilotons of CO2 in 2030, which is obviously not to plan. And as Councillor Lee raised the risks that there are there, and for example, additional housing that we've got coming along as well. So it just kind of doesn't all add up for me on that.
And I think, a good example of why this is a completely cross-council initiative and everything that we're working on is, first of all, we're not increasing the number of houses in Winchester by 62%. We're increasing the target that's been set for new houses by 62%. So we're moving from whatever it is, 600 and 50 or something like that to about 1,100, although there is some legal advice being sought in terms of how we handle that part of our district within the national park. But to me, that's a really good example, because if we were just building regular houses and just, and then absolutely there would be a huge increase in carbon footprint as a result. But we're not. Our local plan has a LETI policy, which says that every new development has to be carbon neutral. It says that, we set standards for the amount of, not just for the amount of energy per square metre that's used for space heating, and for electricity usage, energy usage overall, and also set standards in terms of generation that needs to be happening on sites in order to offset that energy usage. It's not setting building standards; it's setting outcome standards, and it's a policy that we're going to defend very hard in our local plan, which will enable us to ensure that the extra pressure that we get as a result of this new housing is dealt with to a large degree. And similarly, what we're trying to do on transport as well, to ensure that as those people in those new houses travel around, they're on foot, they're on bicycles, there's good infrastructure in place, and hopefully using electric vehicles as well, which we're also encouraging. So the 2030 is incredibly challenging in a national context where firstly, it's unclear what the arrangements for local government will be in 2030, and secondly, where there's been a problem that for many years we didn't have the right level of ambition at the county or nationally in terms of the pace that they would be working at. But you can turn it around and say that unitarisation may mean that there's an opportunity there as well.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. So to achieve carbon neutrality for the district, is the only way you're going to achieve it by the decarbonisation of the grid, because it's totally outside your ability to influence, because the council houses that Winchester owns are now being classed as district, and the purchase of their power is totally their remit.
So I thought it would be useful to look at what some other councils do. And there's only one Green Party controlled council in the country, Mid Suffolk, and I'd like to read what their policy is. Apart from the discovery of some anomalies in the data, most of social housing's energy is the responsibility of the tenant. For this reason, data for social housing is not included in the Mid Suffolk greenhouse gas reporting, despite the council having responsibility for the state of the housing stock. Now, in practice, we're not falling back on that and saying, oh, well, it's not in our number, it can wait till 2030, we don't care. That's not the approach that we want to take. And if you can move to the housing part of the paper, what you'll see is that we're absolutely committed to retrofitting our housing stock, bringing up to a higher environmental standard so that we cut carbon and cut bills. And I know one of the things that Council Westwood is very keen to do is to go beyond that and be looking at how we can be using new technology in those houses where conventional retrofit may not be possible. So there's real energy here to say we will pull the levers we can pull. For example, our council housing stock, to say even if somebody else is paying the bill, and there may be models that emerge as a result of the motion that was discussed at the last council that may change that, then we want to cut carbon in those houses because we want better, warmer, nicer houses for our tenants, which means they're paying lower bills. And if we find models, if the collapse in cost of solar and the other and the associated technologies, the batteries, the controller systems, all of that, where there's enormous market-driven innovation going on at the moment, if that gets us to a place where we can be helping our tenants decarbonise even more and even faster, then nobody will be happier than me.
Thank you. If we can keep questions and answers as succinct as possible, that would be amazing. Councillor Batho.
Thank you. Just in terms of the future of waste and recycling, I'm conscious that I think business are now in the very near future required to recycle their food waste. Is that something that as a council we should be at least aware of and reporting so that we are keeping a track of our business sort of transition in terms of their waste streams?
I think it's a reasonable question. I don't know whether there's a national reporting framework that we could tap into. I mean, in general, I think we should be reporting on things where we can influence the performance and where it drives our own performance. What I wouldn't want to do is to set up a complicated system where we didn't really have a feedback loop into making sure that the process was working better somehow. But you know, it is an area of interest. I think one area of concern is that it may lead to extra traffic movements and other things in the city centre and market towns and villages as well. So it is an area I think we're going to be keeping an eye on, see how it works and what the impact is. In terms of getting into detailed tracking of its rollout, if there is a way of accessing national data on a local level, then we'll definitely do that. I don't think we're in a position to set up our own measurement systems.
No, I just wondered if there was some way through the bid, as we have one in the city, of having a sort of a feedback channel through them. I suppose what I'm wanting to make sure is that we're putting pressure on. We're not responsible for it, but certainly in terms of a sort of progress to achieving those targets, it should be part of our sort of overall remit to watch our businesses and make sure they are progressing in the correct direction.
I mean, I think you raise an important point as to what is the policing mechanism for this. I don't know that we have a role in it. It's something we could go away and investigate, because I agree with you, if there's no pressure for them actually to do it, then that could be a bit of a problem. But again, if we have no powers to do anything about it, then there'll be a limit to what we can do in that circumstance. But it is an area of interest, and I'm happy to take away that we will see if there's a low touch way of tapping into finding out what the enforcement mechanisms are, and whether there will be some metrics that we can tap into to understand progress in our area.
Thank you. Councillor Willis, I know you've got another question on this, and then if everybody's happy, we'll move on to living well.
So, yes, Councillor Power unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening. She's ill, but she asked me to ask a question on her behalf on nutrient neutrality. So I know she. There seems to be a question about. Could you please query why nutrient mitigation on page 425 of the papers is labelled as green? Now, I'm not as familiar as perhaps some of the rest of you with this, but there are some issues. I advise and surprised to see that nutrient mitigation as a green status combines and also at least that is untrue. As part of the scoping document request, there's been various issues that Margot has identified. So could you give us an update on that one, please? One where Mrs. Adey has prepared a few thoughts.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Councillor Powell's poorly. I did write back to her today because she asked the question. So the things we measure in nutrient neutrality is our strategy that was placed on the local plan. So if you go to the local plan topic documents and look up nutrient neutrality, that's where we list all of the demand and the supply for the nutrients we've got coming forwards to make sure that we can still sustain homes being built in the Winchester district. The number of projects that sit under that create the credits for nutrients for phosphates and nitrates are, as we've been bringing forward in council decision papers. So the Q3 is measuring the project, for example, that the HRA wastewater treatments works that was removing some of the phosphates. Councillor Power is asking about a project that doesn't sit in that list. In fact, it's not a project that the council is running at the moment. So she's asking why we're saying we're being successful, but she's asking about a project that's not in the approved list of projects for nutrient neutrality. So I've dropped her a line to let her know that's the case. It doesn't mean the project she's discussing isn't a good project, it's just not in our current list of priority projects at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Living Well. Do we have any questions on Living Well? No? Okay, we'll come on to Homes for All then. Do we have any questions on that section? Councillor Wallet.
On page 437, HFA4, the metric HFA4 on homelessness, it appears that the actuals are increasing rapidly. Should this be a concern? It's still just achieving green, but it has been going up rapidly.
So can I just get to the absolute reference you're talking about? So that's on which page?
437.
Yeah.
437, HFA4.
Yeah, okay. No, I've got it here, Martin. So that's the numbers. HFA4. Okay. Right. So the number of homeless households that we have is increasing. We actually monitor the numbers on a weekly basis now, so I get to see exactly how many referrals we have for homelessness in any week, people approaching us, and actually how many people are, obviously when we get approached for homelessness, we try to mitigate that homelessness, and we do a good job of that. Probably about 3/4 of those people we find homes for before they truly become homeless. Those that do become homeless, we in most cases have a duty to look after. Those numbers are increasing. They're monitored on a weekly basis, and at the moment, to answer your question, we're not concerned about the rate of increase. At the moment is in line with the predictions that we had in the homeless TA paper that we brought to the Cabinet Housing Committee 6 months ago. So we have a plan. The plan is working at the moment.
Thank you. Any other questions on Homes for All? No. Vibrant local economy. Do we have any questions on that section? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Just say I am concerned that the KPIs that we have here, I've said it before, are not detailed enough or relevant enough for us to be confident that we have a absolutely skipping along vibrant economy. I think that there are clearly, when you dig into the detail, there are certain aspects of the economy, particularly hospitality, that's down 10% on sales, 15% on footfall, as they say in the bid report, that we are failing to see with enough transparency in our own KPIs so that we can, make better judgments on other policy decisions that may influence that. And I would just ask again if we could reconsider some of these KPIs for other more relevant ones. Thank you.
We absolutely can reconsider them, because the intention is that when we move to the next council plan in the next year, that we update the KPIs that go with it. I would ask that if you can consider, benchmarking versus what's in that council plan in terms of priorities. But if you have, I think what would be helpful is if there are specific KPIs you have in mind, now is the time to be raising them. And indeed, if this scrutiny committee was to say, well, we'd quite like to look at A, B or C. But all I'd say is that please don't just frame it in terms of we want better KPIs. Tell us what you have in mind. I mean, the one that we immediately, as partly because I had a chance to see the bid footfall system, and it turns out it does actually measure footfall in some of our other centres. And if it is possible to use those, I think it would be healthy for us to be going. So, be able to answer questions like, well, how is Alresford doing? And how they're doing versus Stockbridge and Romsey. And
Would it be useful then if we have a sort of follow-up offline meeting to elucidate some of these KPIs?
I think very happy to have that meeting. My diary is a bit hellish at the moment, but
Tomorrow it is then.
yeah, no, I think frankly now when we've still got one more quarter under the old system and then to go and then the new one, then the more we can start thinking about it on a long lead time. But all I would ask is that firstly there's not too many, and secondly, you know, they're not too expensive, and that there are things that are easily available. And I think that would be really helpful. What I could do that might help is, you know, these are effectively council documents. I can share some of the old bid scorecards that we, sorry, not bid scorecards, but when I was on the LEP, we used to have a scorecard there that we used to assess the local enterprise partnership performance. And that might be, you know, there were some quite interesting numbers in there that might provide a basis for discussion. So I'm happy to share those documents and also the ones that the county looks at in their similar economic work. And the county ones in particular, there's kind of a team who produce those numbers, including for districts, and that might be helpful.
Just caveat that a tiny bit, which is we try and put in what we can influence. Otherwise, it's not meaningful when we're discussing it in the year. It's not always easy. That's why the district carbon ones always look tricky, because, you know, as you say, there's so many outside influences. So, you know, happy to have the conversations that we're having, but the remit that the heads of service have been given is what can you measure that tells us that you and your team are doing a really good job.
So I think this keeps coming up. So actually just having that open conversation where it comes from, for example, Councillor Bolton says, this is the kind of thing I'd be hoping to see. And then if it's pushed back as this is the reason why it's not, then at least we can put it to bed. Anything else on vibrant local economy? No. Your services, your voice. Do we have any questions on that section, please? No. Regen and growth. We've obviously just done quite a lot on regen. Any further questions that we missed? No. Excellent. Right. Do we have any debate on this paper, please? Councillor Wallace.
So I had a question first, if that's all right, a general question. So one of the trainings we got from the training we got at the beginning of the year, one of the things they suggested was, you know, it's better rather than us looking at everything in entirety, it's good to kind of deep dive on certain items. So we had a short deep dive on assets. What is the next item for the deep dive? I mean, this.
I was going to bring that on under work programme. Okay. Because as we mentioned earlier, bear with me, I've made a note. So we talked about the public toilets at the start of the meeting, and there is still some. Councillor Todd, was that me or was that at the toilets? I don't know. So I thought we might deep dive in the toilets and genuinely look into, consider as a group whether it's worth actually doing some proper looking into. If they've been done up, we're still getting complaints. Are we as a group happy? You know, perhaps they come along, this is what we've done to the toilets, this is what they look like now, this is how we've updated the cleaning schedule, blah, blah, blah. We could do a little tour of the toilets in a district. I mean, that's an option. But in all seriousness, is public toilets something we should look at? Councillor Reach.
I'm not going to prolong things. It might just be, I know there's different sort of course, some in the district, there's some that as the chair of the town forum, I think have some responsibility for funding, and there's some elsewhere in the city. It feels like Councillor Thompson maybe a kind of toilet strategy thing. So rather than getting like on that specific one, because there's a whole raft of issues all over the place that that we need to look at. Just a suggestion.
But that's more why I think it's a scrutiny thing, because it's clearly not being picked up. That's exactly. We are still hearing regularly. So Councillor Todd, what are your thoughts on us deep diving toilets?
I don't think we've quite got the language right for the project. But I'm very happy to have that discussion. I mean, I think it would be useful, you know, looking more carefully at usage and other things, to the number of people using our different toilets and other such things did prove really interesting, you know, and led to different choices. So if that's the topic you want to go after, I'm sure we can have a conversation about it.
So there are a couple of other suggestions as well. I know nutrient neutrality is that's been brought to my attention a couple of times about whether it would make sense to have some people looking into that. And also another one that's come up is the Guildhall and how we maintain it and what we do with the Guildhall. So it's just throwing a few more. Couple of other ideas out.
Yeah, I
The
think
Guildhall is the Guildhall. I think that one should be left, Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, we've thrown ourselves at the Guildhall quite a few times. We continue to, you know, there's been a previous scrutiny reports on the Guildhall. Nutrients is an interesting one because it does get, in theory, scrutinised via the Partnership for South Hampshire, but it is an important issue.
But we are also quite limited on what we can do, aren't we? So, I mean, what would the outcome of that be, other than us understanding more about what we can and can't do, and then something else will come down the line that we can do, and then we'll do it. But
yeah, and in that respect, actually, a discussion about toilets, because understanding, I mean, one of the things that could come into scope on that would be a discussion about the impact of local government reorganisation on public toilet provision as well. And some of the discussions with the parishes that would be associated with it.
so Councillor Wallace just mentioned maybe nutrients would be more of a briefing. Actually, that might be worth considering if you're happy to take that away as a member briefing on that at some point.
Thank you for allowing a consider. I'll take a consider. I'm sure we can do it. It's important that we have a cohesive message and confidence with our local plan examination. So I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. So does everybody agree? We'll think of a catchier title, but deep diving toilets. Is everybody happy that that's something we should do? Councillor Bolton?
Yes, however, is there any chance we've got any answers to Mr. Perkins? I think it was Mr. Perkins, wasn't it? Market Lane public toilet question, which was that there was earmarked 750,000. Is that right? 750,0and?
I'm not sure anyone will have the figures here off the top of their head, but do you? Oh, Councillor Todd.
But his issue was that he'd been told only 30,000 had been spent on them, and it was they were still inadequate, and it was approved back in 23. And I just wondered if we had an answer to his question.
I mean, first of all, just to be absolutely clear, I mean, you know, all the toilet facilities were replaced, all the basins were replaced, all the chinaware was replaced, the floor was redone. Now, that's in the context of, at the time we took the decision, it being on a short-term lease. And that is quite an important question, because I suspect that if we thought we've got this for another 100 years, 200 years, then we would have been in a position to make different choices for the kind of investment that we made. I have to say the feedback I get from people is different, which is that there has been a noticeable improvement, that they are cleaner than they were before. There's some new people working there who seem to be doing a very good job and making it look better. So, you know, if I compare it to where it was, I think it's much, much better. And again, I've heard that fairly broadly. It's not perfect. It's a very, very heavily used public toilet, and inevitably there will be moments when people don't have a great experience when they visit it. But it's better than it was.
But is that something, so for example, sorry to interrupt you, but sometimes people come out the toilets and they press the happy face, don't they? And everyone, when you come out the toilet, doesn't really want to press the happy face or the sad face because everyone else might not have washed their hands. But nonetheless, you can do some sort of straw poll
I
and
think,
respond to it.
but that feels like a discussion that we could have in the scrutiny discussion. I mean, that could be an idea that we look at. We have actually talked about trying to measure satisfaction and reaction to interactions with the council more. Now, because that's got an IT element, it's one of those things that the local government reorganisation makes harder unless we can do it in a really soft touch way. But you know, we've talked a lot more about wanting to know how people feel about council provision and services more at the time that they use it. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I don't want to make any promises. It feels to me like a good discussion point to come out of the work that you might be doing.
It feels like let's try and come up with some practical ways to truly gauge people's happiness, sadness, because nobody's going to come up to us as councillors and go, that public toilet's brilliant. They're only going to come up and go, I had a really bad experience.
I mean, you see that again, that hasn't been my experience. I've had people come up to me and say that it's improved. That is, and I've had people come up to me and say, but on this particular occasion, it wasn't. But let's not get too much into the details of that. So there was a very good reason why we didn't spend as much as we could have,
which we're not going to talk about right now.
Which was the short
dive.
lease. That was why. And we are spending more in other parts of the district because, frankly, firstly, some of the toilets need much more substantial work. And secondly, we tend to own the site outright. And so you make different decisions for the kind of investment you made to bring them up to a good standard for the long term.
Right. So if we could take that away as a range of follow-up, that would be really helpful. I'm aware that it's now 9:45. Do we have any debate on this paper? Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, everybody. I did want to make one point in the debate on the carbon monitoring, tackling the climate emergency. I'm very disappointed to see in this paper the numbers, how it has been portrayed in this paper. My understanding when I was introduced to scrutiny was that scrutiny was backward looking. It was looking at what we've done in the past and reviewing it and assessing it and trying to learn lessons for going forward. When we're talking about tackling the climate emergency and looking at our annual carbon footprint, we're talking about a forecast improvement, not an actual improvement, not something that's happened in the past. We're talking about something that we're hoping is going to happen in the future. And also we're talking about a metric that we haven't presented until the meeting today. This is the first time that we've recorded that metric. We've changed the metric at the last minute. And I find it appears to achieve a political objective. I find that very difficult, and I'm disappointed, frankly, that to see it in this report. I was surprised when I saw it in highlighted, but to actually see it in a report produced by officers, I find quite disappointing. So I just wanted to make that point.
Do we have any more debate on this? No. Okay. Well, thank you for your engagement on this paper. I don't have any specific points to feed back to the Cabinet meeting. Moving on to item 9, to note the latest forward plan of key decisions. Are we happy to note that? And is there anything anybody particularly wants to pick up for our working plan from that? Oh. Okay, in that case, it is now 9:48, meeting closed. Have a lovely evening. Safe drive home in the fog.